When people are getting into macro or calorie tracking, or even when they're starting to look at changing their food behaviors, one of the major questions that I often get asked is whether or not we track our food in its raw or uncooked state, or whether we track our food in its cooked state. And for the most part, we are going to be using the raw or uncooked weight of that food, because that is what most nutrition labels and most nutrition information is based off of, because the cooking process can change the weight of a food item. So if you look at this graphic on the screen, you can see that an 8-ounce raw chicken breast, once it's cooked, there is water that comes out of that and it dehydrates it and dries it out a little bit. So it's going to weigh less after the cooking process, and it's only 6 ounces at the end. On the other hand, things like pasta or rice, they absorb water as they cook and they become heavier through that cooking process. So 2 ounces of raw pasta could end up being upwards of 4.5 ounces of cooked pasta by the end. It's important to know that it doesn't actually change the calories of that item, but how we track the calories can be heavily influenced if we're using the raw weight and the cooked weight interchangeably when the nutrition information is not designed that way. So if I go into my food tracking app, I've got an example listed here. I have 2 separate entries for rice. One of them is designed specifically for tracking rice in its uncooked state, and the other one is for tracking rice in its cooked state. If I was to weigh out 100 grams of rice uncooked, that'd be a lot of grams of rice. Like, it would be a fairly decent size. If I was to then cook the rice and it absorbs water, that 100 grams is going to weigh quite a bit more at the end. It's going to expand, it's going to look like it takes up more room on the plate, and it is going to weigh more, even though the calories would still be the same, which is 347 calories. And you can see that listed right here. 100 grams of uncooked would be 347 calories. But if I'm mistakenly using either the wrong nutrition information, or I'm using the cooked versus uncooked weight interchangeably, there's a really big discrepancy here. If I was to weigh out 100 grams of cooked rice, that's going to be significantly less rice than my 100 grams that was uncooked and then I cooked it and it expanded. 100 grams of cooked rice is a lot smaller of a portion. And you can see that here, that 100 grams of cooked rice using an entry that's designed for that is only 114 calories. So it's important to know what kind of nutrition information you are using when you are tracking your food, or when you're designating portion size. If you're not tracking your food, 1 cup of cooked rice versus 1 cup of uncooked rice is an important designation to make when you're trying to decide on a portion size. And it's important to know that most food labels and most nutrition information has been designed for that food item in its uncooked state, because how people cook their food will look a little bit different. Think about it like a steak, where people will ask for a steak to be cooked to a different level of doneness. That will change the weight very significantly. A person who has a rare steak is going to have a very different weight than a person who has a well-done steak, even if they started at the same weight when they were raw. The more cooked it is, the more water that steak is going to lose and the lighter it's going to be. So we just really need to be aware of how the nutrition information is designed, what it says on the label, keeping in mind that if it does not tell you, you would assume that it's in its uncooked state. It will usually tell you if you're supposed to be tracking it in its cooked state. An example of that might be a popcorn label. Will often have both, actually. But it will usually tell you if it's in its cooked state. If it does not say anything, you can assume it's uncooked. But I just wanted to show the discrepancy that happens if we were to use those weights interchangeably, because they are not interchangeable. So keep that in mind when you are portioning out certain foods and when you are tracking certain foods, and make sure that you're using the correct entry and the correct weight.